So, as you all know, this is Tara Herster, the founder of the Tara Clinic. And I met Tara a couple of years ago in Bondi, at F45, I met her. And we've been friends since, so I invited Tara here today because it's a perfect fit for her. And I also want to ask a few questions in regards to drug and alcohol addiction, because that's what you specialise in. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the Tara Clinic and what you do for a profession?
Absolutely. So I've been a psychologist now for almost a decade, which is quite weird to say. However, I started the Tara Clinic. So Tara stands for Therapeutic Addiction Recovery Assistance. So little play on words. Thanks, Mum, for a really easy name. That's my awesome mum in the back. So I started this business because I really understood that there was a gap in how addiction was being supported within the community and with people of every socioeconomic space. There seems to be a real difference in the way that the community looks at people with addiction, how people talk about addiction and substance use and substance abuse within different circles of friends, maybe colleagues. It really doesn't discriminate. So the reason that I started the Tara Clinic was because while addiction doesn't discriminate, the support options that are available seemed to. So I wanted to stop that. My mission really is to ensure that everybody has access to holistic and harm minimization approaches to treatment so that we can get rid of the stigma, because that's just shit. So that's me.
Yeah. So powerful. That's amazing, Tara. And I just wanted to dive into, you've listened to obviously the stories that we've been talking about today and what we've been discussing. And based off of those topics, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on the physiological effects and impact drug and alcohol abuse and prostitution could have on a young woman's mind and life as they go into adulthood.
Yeah, it's a really big question. Just heads up, I haven't received these questions, so there might be moments where I need to pause and think about it, which is what I'm doing now. Okay, so I guess the short answer to that question is our brain doesn't stop truly developing until we're in our early 20s. So the younger we are, the less of our brain has developed and the more of the actual pathways are being created. The way that those pathways are created is through practice and repetition. And what we see around us and what we experience and what we're doing is part of that practice and repetition. So when we're little, we're basically a sponge, and quite often it's this it's similar to some of the stories that we've heard today, where I saw that's what my parents did, so I thought that was okay, because our primary and secondary caregivers are the ones that usually show us the way to live the life that we're meant to live. So when we start engaging in drug and alcohol use or other behaviours that might be moving us away from experiencing our feelings, quite often I have people say to me, it's a release, it's an escape, it's to shift away from a yucky feeling to a nicer feeling, or maybe just to normal, so just to not hurt so much. What we're doing is we're creating a pathway in the brain that says, I feel this feeling, I do this behaviour, I get this outcome. And in the short term, it really works. And because it works, we do it again. Just like if we touch something hot and it burns, we probably don't do it again. So the things that work, we practice more. The things that don't work, we practice less. So when we've seen other people in our lives do things and practice them over and over again, and, well, they're our parents, it should be working, why would they do something that doesn't? Then that can be part of the reason why we might try it ourselves. Another thing is when we're young, we really, really want to fit in. So being a part of something, being part of a group can really, impact the choices that we may make, the opportunities that are available to us. So if we're in a group environment where perhaps drug use is a thing, then we're probably more likely to give it a go because we don't know what we don't know. And a lot of the time, the way that drug and alcohol use is spoken about to young people is through fear rather than true education. So what I can tell you is that from the last time you use methamphetamine, your brain is losing its mind for at least 9 months. It's not until you've stopped for 9 months after your last use that your brain has actually quietened down enough to just look at what life looks like without the substance in it. So like things like that, you know, when we know more information and education, we're able to actually make educated decisions rather than, oh, well, you know, I'm scared of the dark, but I like playing, you know, Spotlight. So, you know, the things that are scary are enticing, the things that are scary are exciting. So if we have more education around it, then people might not necessarily want to try something because it's not a scary thing, it's a known thing, it's an understood thing. The other impacts that can have is, I guess, on development. So a lot of the time when there is domestic violence in the home or addiction in the home, there can be this concept of a role reversal. So the child becomes the parent and the parent becomes the child. So we hear a lot this idea of growing up really quick and having to take care of our primary caregivers. That's a real thing. And what that does is it basically stops the developmental kind of pathway that the brain wants to go through and that a child wants to develop through. So when we skip that, we can sometimes then later on want to try and find that, because all the pebbles on the road kind of need to be a thing. So we want to try and find them. And sometimes we look in places that aren't so helpful.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Tara, what are your views and opinions on how society and authority handle the addicts?
Well, I guess one thing that I'm going to start off with there is I personally don't identify people as addicts. I think someone lives with addiction. I am not the problem is the problem. So therefore, I think one of the biggest shifts that I would make in the world would be to shift away from labelling, because our words mirror our thoughts and our thoughts impact our beliefs, and all of what we do comes from our beliefs. So if I say I'm an addict, then I think I'm an addict, and I believe I'm an addict, I'm probably going to act that way. So I'm going to surround myself with people, do the same sort of things, be that way. So I work from a harm minimization approach, which is very closely linked to SMART recovery. SMART stands for self-management and recovery training. That's not mine. So I love an acronym, but that one wasn't mine. And basically what SMART looks at is let's actually utilize the strengths of the individual and understand the problem is separate from the individual, and then let's work around how can we reduce the risks to the individual by using your strengths. So that's how I look at addiction treatment, and I think that that would be a really great way for the community at large to do so. In pardon me, in terms of government sort of thing, I'm connected to Harm Reduction Australia. I strongly advocate for harm reduction sort of ways of looking at things, policies, those sorts of stuff. From my belief, if someone isn't yet ready to stop, that can't be the only option. There needs to be something in the middle to make things safe. So part of what harm reduction looks at is the needle and syringe programs, so that we have safe places to use, we have safe injections, we have everything is clean. Methadone is another example. While if we're not yet ready to get off heroin, we've got a safer way of doing so. So these are some of the things that I think are really important, is actually having options to create a safer environment for the community and the individual, so that at least there's an option to move away from drugs and alcohol if they want to.
So what are your views and opinions on how society and authorities handle people with addiction?
Well, the way that they handle them is they tend to handle people as criminals.
Yeah.
And I think that that is a big problem. I was working in a rehab for people just released from prison for 2.5 years, and I'm working towards being able to open my own rehab for that population myself. However, when I was working with that population, one of the things that I really noticed, which broke my heart the most, was that I was sometimes the first person that they actually felt heard them. And that's horrible. To have a 45-year-old man sitting in front of me saying, "Holy shit, you're the first person that's actually stopped and listened to me when I've said that I'm struggling right now, and not told me that I just have to man up, or I have to just get in and do it, or just stop because it's a choice," or all of these sorts of things. There was no judgment with me, and he had never experienced no judgment before. So when someone is seen as a criminal, you're seen as doing the wrong thing. And unfortunately, there are some times where living a life of addiction can definitely place yourself in a situation where you're making choices that are doing the wrong thing. However, the person is not the problem is the problem. So rather than looking at someone as the problem, look at the problem and then work around a way to manage the problem. That would be how I would love the world to handle this.
Okay, I'd love to know your thoughts on a standard glass of wine every day. When does that become an issue or an addiction?
I am asked that question so many times. I guess I don't want to ramble because it really just depends. It depends on so many things. So firstly, why are we having the glass of wine every night? Is it because we need to? Is it because that's the only way that I know to calm down? Is it because I deserve that? I've earned it? Is that my reward? Right? I am not personally in recovery. I don't identify as having any kind of addiction. I suppose my only addiction is to not have an addiction. So I put things into place to ensure that I don't do that. Because habits are things that can be built, as well as coming from sort of underlying traumas and things. What I will say is addiction is the opposite of connection. When you have true connection, addiction doesn't tend to live in your life. Addiction, I talk about this little dude on your shoulder that spins stories about how you've earned it, you deserve it, you just won, it'll be fine, you're okay, you can stop whenever you want. All of those things is this dude. And when our connection is just with him, then it's connected to whatever the behavior is. So it could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be sex, it could be gambling, it could be food. It doesn't matter what it is. If our connection is with that thing to soothe us, then that's essentially what addiction is. However, if you look at the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders or something, I don't know, it's this great big book that's like this thick, and it basically helps you to diagnose every kind of mental health concern that could possibly be known. And basically there are some criteria that need to be ticked off to say that you have an addiction to a certain substance. And the short version of those tick boxes are: if you're having more of the substance than what you originally used to have or wanted to have to get the same feeling, to get the same high. If you've tried to cut down and stop and you've been unsuccessful, when you have stopped, there's been an experience of detox. So you're either coming down, sweats, chills, those sorts of things, gastric distress, that sort of stuff. I've just bounced over 3 of them, so now I've lost my place. If your substance use is impacting negatively on your health and well-being, and you know that and you're doing it anyway, if it's impacting on your ability to engage in school, life, work, or have relationships, whether that's interpersonal relationships or romantic relationships. Basically, if it's doing you harm in some way and putting you at risk in some way, and you're still doing it, and trying to stop isn't all that easy, then essentially that's what addiction looks like. However, I did a podcast earlier in the year that I literally read them all out, and the incredible person that I was doing the podcast with, she basically looked at me and said, "Holy shit, that's everyone," because I read it out for alcohol. And I said, yeah, sometimes, you know, like it can look like that. However, if it's negatively impacting on you, then we want to try and do something about it. So if the one glass of wine is happening because I've earned it, or because I deserve it, or because it's the only way I know to calm down, it's the same as having a cup of coffee in the morning. I can't start until I have my coffee. Don't even talk to me until I've had my coffee. I don't drink coffee, so I don't know what that feels like. Yeah, right? So basically, I guess it's something that we hear a lot, and while talking about it with coffee gets a giggle, talk about it with ice and we get ugh. Talk about it with heroin, we get oh. Talk about it with, you know, something else, right? Like it actually doesn't change the situation. If we feel that we need something other than food, water and air to essentially survive, then chances are there could be something going on, and it'd be an idea to maybe have a chat to someone about it.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there an addictive gene that some people carry and others may not?
Holy crap.
There's been research.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah. Yes, there has been research, and the research that I'm currently aware of is was done specifically around alcohol. Now, there is like a terminology of an addictive personality and those sorts of things. Essentially, the way that I look at it is if I haven't found myself in a situation where I've been taught how to cope with distress, taught how to understand emotions, taught how to communicate what my boundaries are, and learned that it's okay to maintain those boundaries, even if setting those boundaries and maintaining it hurts someone else, then we're probably more likely to have an addiction. There is a predisposition. I really want to stress that word. There is a predisposition. It doesn't mean that we're definitely going to get it. However, there is a predisposition that if our direct family member has some sort of addiction, specifically the research was done around alcohol, then we are more likely to have an addiction to alcohol in our life. So, for example, if maybe my parents had addictions to alcohol, I may have a predisposition to it. So if the environment is such that I'm not learning how to manage my emotions, if the environment is such that I'm drinking quite regularly, if the environment is such that that's what's the norm in my social group, all those sorts of things, if the environment is set up in the way to maintain and honour that, then I will probably end up with an addiction to alcohol.
So interesting. So interesting. And I want to bring this now to trauma. So we know that there needs to be healing from trauma. How would you suggest someone would heal from that?
Well, the very first thing is not to talk about the specifics straight up, because essentially what can happen is when we're not ready to actually discuss the experience of the trauma that we've had, what can happen is the distress becomes so big that we don't know how to handle that, and we go back to the thing that's worked before, which was drugs, alcohol, sex, food, gambling, whatever it may be, right? So the way that I look at it is fill your toolbox with a whole world full of tools to manage any kind of stress or distress or any, basically any uncomfortable feelings, so that we can practice that and feel comfortable in that prior to engaging in like actually going deep down, because what's down there, we've pushed it down for a reason, and in the pushing down, it's kept us safe till today. So no matter what you've been doing to manage your trauma, you've done the best that you can with the tools at your disposal, and it's kept you safe till today. Once we then start to add extra tools to that, and you're able to really find your safe space, you're able to find how to access that when you're feeling too distressed in the conversation around trauma, then we can start to explore what was the trauma. How do we work through that? If you jump that step, you've basically left someone ready to drown without having the pebbles to come back out of the river whenever they want. So ensuring that you're doing that work with someone that is very highly trained in that area. I work with a lot of people who have a history of trauma. However, if the trauma is so complex that it's outside of my scope of expertise, I refer on to a specific trauma therapist, because it is a very important and kind of separate thing. Addiction is a symptom. It is not the problem. And in understanding that symptom, you can start to work to manage the symptom before you start to kind of dig deep into the problem.
Yeah, wow.
Okay, what's the first step you take to support someone who's going through a traumatic event? You say don't approach them, wait till they approach you, but if you can see that they need help, what would you?
Sure. So I guess that's the advice that I gave earlier about not approaching others and getting them to come to you. That's more in a circumstance such as here.
Okay.
So let's just say I tell you about a traumatic event that happened to me, and I was able to kind of be boundaried here and share what I was ready to share and what I was happy to share. If I then go out and start mingling and people ask me more probing questions, I don't know if I'm going to be ready for that, prepared for that. I've prepared myself for this, I haven't prepared myself for that. So it can cause harm, essentially. So that was my suggestion about that. When you're noticing that there are people around you who are perhaps experiencing some traumatic events, or perhaps you're just noticing that they're looking or acting or engaging in life in a different way to what they used to or what you feel is safe, then actually sitting down and asking if they're okay. Because, how do I put this? This is like 6 months worth of therapy in 5 minutes. So I'm trying to think of what's the most important things to share. Basically, allowing someone to know that you are a safe person is the most important thing. Once the person knows that you are safe, that no matter what they tell you, you're not going to, oh God, that's too much, right? Or, oh, I had no fucking idea. Oh my God, are you okay? How could you right? Like those sorts of responses are not the responses that someone needs when they're going through their own experience of craziness, right? They need someone that's there, that's ready to sit in the shit with them and go, okay, cool, this really stinks. Let's just hang out here for a minute and you can share with me what you want to share. You don't have to share anything you don't want to share. And then once you feel like you've shared enough, then we bring in the supports. So essentially, it's important as a friend to know who to go to. So kind of having a bit of a Google search. In, like I said earlier, in your little bags, there's a list of different resources that I tend to suggest for people to go to. But just knowing, yes, there's Lifeline. However, there's also the Suicide Callback Service. There's also the Rape Crisis Centre. There's also, there's so many different 24/7 phone lines that you can call and just sit with the person, and even you can have the conversation with the people on the phone on their behalf and just have the phone open with on speaker and just say, hi, I'm Tara. I'm here with my friend. She shared some stuff with me and I'm not sure what the next best way to move forward is, can we talk it through? She's here, she can hear you. And then boom, you start the conversation, because you're a safe person. You're potentially, I don't know who's here, however, you're potentially not a professional, so it's not your job to fix it. It's not your job to carry it home with you. It's not your job to rescue these people. These people are clearly coming to you saying, hey, I'm struggling and I don't know what to do. You seem safe. I'm sharing this with you. And then you hear it, you listen, you connect with another service, and then know that it's okay that if you're finding what you've heard hard, to also engage in a service yourself. A lot of so for example, with drug and alcohol use, there's a really great phone line called the Alcohol and Drug Information Service, and that phone line is available for people who are currently in crisis. They want to talk about something themselves, they want information, or they want a referral. And it's also really great for family and friends. So you can call them yourself and say, hey, I have this friend that looks like this, what should I do? It's about basically providing a safe place and then introducing them to a professional.
Yeah. I really love that. And I love the fact how, you're building that relationship and opening, creating conversations with people when they need it, which is good, which is awesome. Now, I want to go into, I love the saying, your past is not your life sentence. And I love that. And I think that sometimes too often, you must find that people will also fall victim into their life, what they've been through from childhood or whatever. How do you help people overcome that and get them to a place of peace and harmony within themselves? And this again comes back to trauma and stuff, and not playing the victim.
This is one of those pausing, thinking breaths.
you can think. I'm laying big questions on you.
Yeah, well, again, it's about 2 years of therapy, really. And I guess part of what I like to do is setting really realistic expectations around how long it can take, depending on what's happened for you, what sort of strengths you do have, who you have around you, who you have to support you, and all of that plays a part. Can you ask me the question again?
So in terms of, how does someone come to terms with the fact that their past is not their life sentence, and
Right.
instead of
I guess it's challenging. You guys did so well.
we really thought it was about 11
Seriously.
o'clock at night, and we were really
You're
deep.
killing it. Oh
We'd
my God.
we'd spoken a lot.
I love it. Okay, all right. So, again, the person is not the problem is the problem. So firstly, understanding that whatever is going on for you or inside you or around you is not you. And when we can start to shift away from self-blame, the shoulds are the death of me. I remove should, would, could, and but from everybody's vocabulary as soon as they become a client of mine, because they're very unhelpful words. When we do the shoulda, woulda, coulda train, we're beating ourselves up, and but just change it to and it'll seriously change your life. Just a free little tidbit there. But basically, I just said but. Basically, understanding that it is not you as the human you are allows there to be an option for something else. When I identify with my trauma, or identify with my addiction, or I identify with the problem, then how can I be anything else? Like, it doesn't make sense. There's only so much room in me. And if all of me is that, then what else is there? So even if we feel like the trauma is up to here and we feel like we can barely breathe, there's still a little bit left that's us. So it doesn't matter how much that space is, even if it's just 1% of you, just knowing that that's not you, it's a part of you, and it will never be bigger than you. I guess the short sort of version of 6 to 12, 18, 24 months of therapy is surrounding yourself with really helpful and healthy people, ensuring that you're around some sort of professional support, and really making sure you look after your basics: food, water, self-care, exercise. Yeah, a healthy living is so helpful for trauma. I can't even explain it. Healthy living kicks trauma's butt. A lot.
Amazing. And to wrap up our final question, what do you believe
Oh God.
finding your inner power means?
Oh.
So what does it mean to you? What does it mean to you, Tara?
I had no idea what you were going to ask me then. All right, what does finding your inner power mean to me? All right. Some research has been done that shows that there is more connections from the gut to our brain than there is from the heart to our brain. Notice what your gut feeling is and actually hear it. Be still enough within yourself, be quiet enough within yourself to hear what your gut is saying and follow it. Because back in the Ugg days, when we had saber-toothed tigers trying to kill us, our gut was the thing that kept us alive. Our gut was the thing that stopped us from walking through the scary forest. Our gut was the thing that could, wake up in the middle of the night and smell the smoke coming over the horizon. It's our gut that does all of those things. For me, in today's world, it's my gut that tells me to cross the road. For no other reason than cross the road, and I go, okay, cool, I'm crossing the road. And sometimes my friends are like, what the fuck are you doing? And I'm going, well, my gut said so, so I'm going to do it. It hasn't proved me wrong so far. And in every situation where something has happened that I haven't been okay with, my gut was screaming at me and I didn't listen. So for me, finding your inner power is stilling yourself enough to trust your gut.
I love that.
Wow.
That's so good. What a perfect answer. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tara, for answering those questions. I know we really do